Let's talk about something that's, well, deeply frustrating. It's that pattern where we find ourselves holding on for dear life to partners who, let's be honest, consistently give us less than we deserve. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the psychological trap behind this, something called relationship scarcity. They're inconsistent. They can be disrespectful, distant, you know the type. And yet there's this terrifying, gut-wrenching fear at the very thought of letting them go. It's a question so many of us ask ourselves: why on earth do we cling to the very people who bring us down? This is that painful conflict, isn't it? Between what we know we deserve and what we feel compelled to accept. Well, the answer lies inside a really powerful psychological paradox, a cognitive trap called relationship scarcity. And what it is a mindset that quietly, sneakily warps your perception of value. It tricks you into seeing the smallest crumbs of affection as a four-course meal. It's this mechanism that literally compels you to overvalue low effort, and in this explainer, we're going to take it apart piece by piece. So, what is this trap of relationship scarcity exactly? And, more importantly, how does it actually work on our minds? To really get into the mechanics of it, we first have to look at the condition, the thing that makes us so vulnerable to it in the first place. It really all begins with one of the most powerful, most primal human emotions there is: the fear of being alone. This fear right here, it sets the entire stage for everything that follows. So let's get a really clear definition on the books. Relationship scarcity is what we call a cognitive bias. It's basically a glitch in our thinking that messes with our judgment. And its main job, it compels you to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, overvalue any partner who offers even the bare minimum of attention or commitment. It's like your mind starts treating basic human decency like it's a rare diamond, making you feel desperate to hold on to any piece of it you can find, no matter how flawed it is. And the engine driving this whole thing is a primal fear, specifically the fear of isolation. Think about it. For our ancestors living in tribes, being alone wasn't just sad, it was a death sentence. It was a true existential threat. And guess what? That ancient wiring is still humming away inside us today. And when it gets triggered, our modern rational brain can just get completely hijacked. That fear of being alone feels so big, so threatening, that staying with a low-value partner can somehow feel like the safer bet. It's completely illogical, but it feels true. Okay, so now we see how this fear sets the stage. Let's look at how it builds into this really destructive cycle. We're going to get into the mechanism of the trap itself, a self-sabotage loop that, once it gets going, can be incredibly hard to break out of. This loop is surprisingly predictable. It runs on a three-step cycle. First, something triggers a sense of perceived loss. That leads you right into step 2, overinvestment. You start clinging. And finally, to justify all that effort, your brain does something really clever. And this is the most important step: value redefinition. Let's break each one down. So it all kicks off with step 1, perceived loss. And I really want you to focus on that word perceived. This isn't always a real loss, it's the fear of one. The trigger could be anything: a fight, them pulling away for a few days, or just your own fear of being single bubbling up. This creates this sudden, massive spike of anxiety, and your focus just narrows into this tunnel where the only thing in the world that matters is keeping this one person from leaving. And that spike of anxiety, it shoves you right into step 2, overinvestment. In this panic to stop the loss you're so scared of, you start to cling. You begin pouring a completely disproportionate amount of emotional energy into the relationship. You're the one texting more, you're accommodating their schedule, you're forgiving things that honestly you probably shouldn't. You're just pouring your time and energy into securing this one scarce resource, usually at the expense of your own needs. This is a classic psychological trap. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. You know that feeling, right? It's like you're an hour into a terrible movie, but you think, well, I've already invested an hour, I might as well finish it. That's the sunk cost fallacy. You feel like because you've already put in so much time, so much emotion, so many second chances, you can't possibly walk away now. This fallacy is the psychological glue that keeps you stuck, pouring good energy after bad, just hoping you'll finally get a return on your investment. Now your brain is in a total bind. On one hand, you've got the hard facts. Your partner's behavior is inconsistent and frankly low value. But on the other hand, you have your own huge, high-value investment in them. Your brain just can't hold those two conflicting ideas at the same time. It creates too much stress. And this leads us to the final and most sneaky step of the loop: value redefinition. So how does the brain solve this puzzle? It uses a neat little trick called cognitive dissonance. That's the name for that intense mental stress you feel when your actions, like staying and investing more, are totally at odds with your beliefs, like this person treats me badly and I deserve better. To get rid of that discomfort, something's gotta give. And since it's really hard to take back your investment, it's often psychologically easier to just change your belief about the partner. And if you've ever been in this situation, this is gonna sound very familiar. This is rationalization in action. You start telling yourself stories. Oh, they're not ignoring me, they're just really busy right now. Or they didn't mean to be rude, they're just under a lot of stress. You are actively creating stories that reframe their bad behavior to make it seem acceptable, all to make yourself feel better and justify why you're still there. Okay, so we've got the how, but what about the why? Why does this whole thing keep going, sometimes for years? To get that, we need to look at the motivations, what each person is actually getting out of this unhealthy dance. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the motivations are completely different. For the person caught in the scarcity trap, their motivation is all about threat management. Their main goal, even if it's subconscious, is to escape the intense pain of feeling lonely. It's a defensive, fear-based move. But for the low-value partner, their motivation is often just effortless supply. They're getting a steady stream of validation, attention, and control, all for the least amount of work possible. It's fundamentally imbalanced. One person is desperately trying to manage a threat, while the other is just casually collecting a prize. And this imbalanced trap gets 10 times stronger because of something called intermittent reinforcement. The best way to think about this is a slot machine in Vegas. It doesn't pay out every single time, right? It pays out just often enough and just unpredictably enough to keep you pulling that lever. In the relationship, their occasional good behavior, that one nice day, that one sweet text, that's the jackpot. It literally creates an emotional addiction, keeping you hooked on the hope of the next win, no matter how many times you lose. Okay, we have spent a lot of time taking this trap apart, piece by painful piece. Now, let's talk about how to break it. We're gonna pivot from just analyzing the problem to taking action. This next part is all about the countermeasure, the practical, strategic steps to recognize this pattern and finally break the cycle. Look, getting out of this isn't about just trying harder or hoping for the best. It requires a real strategy. There are 3 core defense strategies. First, and this is the big one, you have to acknowledge that the feeling of scarcity is internal. It's in your head, not a reflection of reality. Second, you have to get crystal clear on your non-negotiables. And third, you have to learn to enforce a powerful boundary that's not about them, but about you. So let's make this really concrete. Defining your non-negotiables means creating a new minimum standard. And what does that look like? Well, it starts with things like this. Consistent effort. No more accepting random crumbs of attention. Emotional respect. Your feelings are valid, period. Clear communication. The guessing games are over. Mutual investment. Effort has to flow both ways. And finally, behavioral integrity, which just means their actions have to match their words. These aren't luxuries. Let me repeat that. These are not luxuries. They are the absolute baseline for healthy connection. And this brings us to the final and honestly the most powerful tool in your toolbox, the no investment boundary. This is your direct counterattack on the sunk cost fallacy. The rule is simple. When a partner shows low-value behavior that violates your minimum standard, you immediately stop investing. You stop sending that extra text. You stop clearing your schedule. You stop pouring your precious emotional energy into figuring them out. This one single action breaks the cycle of overinvestment and stops that sunk cost loop dead in its tracks. So we've gone through the trap and we've gone through the countermeasures, but to really wrap this up, let's zoom out for a second to the big idea here, the core principle. The ultimate fix isn't about finding a better person. It's about fundamentally rewiring your own mind. Please just take a moment and let this one sink in. The problem is not a lack of options out there in the world. It is the perception of scarcity inside your own mind that forces you to overvalue what is low value. The trap isn't external. It was never about a shortage of good people. The entire trap is an internal illusion. The moment you shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance, that deep down belief that you are worthy of a high-value connection, the trap just dissolves. So let's bring it all home. Relationship scarcity is a mindset, a glitch in our thinking that pushes us to choose low-value partners. The pattern is a vicious cycle. The fear of a perceived loss triggers a panicked overinvestment. And then, to make it all make sense, your brain uses cognitive dissonance to redefine their low-value behavior as somehow high value. But simply being aware of this pattern is the key that breaks the loop. By consciously defining your non-negotiable value and by actively enforcing that no investment boundary, you do so much more than just leave a bad situation. You assert your own worth and you dismantle the trap for good.